Before modern agriculture, before synthetic fertilizers, before pesticide sprays and raised bed kits from the hardware store, people grew food. They grew a lot of it. And they grew it reliably year after year from the same soil without depleting it. For over 2 centuries, small-scale European kitchen gardens, potagers in France, cottage gardens in England, house gardens in Germany, fed families through winters, wars, and famines using a layout most modern gardeners have completely abandoned. These were not primitive gardens, they were systems designed to produce the maximum amount of food from a small space with no external inputs. No bags of fertilizer, no replacement soil, no sprays, just a layout that worked with biology instead of against it. And the core design principles behind these gardens are not just historically interesting. They are measurably more productive than the way most people garden today. In this video, I'm going to break down the 4 principles that made these gardens work and how to apply them in your own backyard. Stay to the end because the 4th principle is the one modern gardening lost entirely, and it is the reason most gardens get worse over time instead of better. The first principle is dense polyculture, growing multiple crops together instead of separating them into single crop rows. Modern gardens are organized like factories. 1 row of tomatoes, 1 row of peppers, everything separated. This looks orderly, but it wastes space and creates pest highways. Pre-industrial gardens were dense, layered, and intentionally mixed. Tall crops in the back, pole beans on stakes, corn, sunflowers, medium crops in the middle, tomatoes, cabbages, peppers, low crops across the front, lettuce, herbs, radishes, ground cover crops like squash underneath, shading soil and suppressing weeds naturally, every vertical layer occupied, every square foot producing. When you use vertical space efficiently, the same ground footprint produces 2 to 3 times more food than single crop rows. I resisted this for 2 seasons because it looked messy. The season I committed to polyculture planting, my per square foot yield nearly doubled. The beds looked chaotic in May. By July, they were the most productive I had ever grown. The key is that the layering is not random. You are placing plants based on height, root depth, and harvest timing so they complement each other instead of competing. Tall crops that need full sun go where they will not shade shorter crops. Fast crops like radishes and lettuce fill gaps between slow crops like tomatoes and peppers that take weeks to fill their space. By the time the slow crops need the room, the fast crops have already been harvested. The second principle is pest management through diversity. These old gardens did not follow companion planting charts. They followed a simpler rule: never let one crop dominate a space. Aromatic herbs were everywhere, not in a separate garden, woven directly among the vegetables. Basil next to tomatoes, dill among cabbages, onions and garlic scattered throughout. These plants were placed because generations of gardeners observed that crops surrounded by strong scented plants had fewer pest problems. We now know the mechanism. Olfactory confusion disrupts the chemical signals pests use to find their targets. But gardeners 200 years ago did not need the science. They knew it worked because their grandparents had done it. Alongside the aromatics, these gardens always included flowering plants, not for decoration, but for function. Flowers attracted predatory insects that controlled pests naturally. What we now call an insectary strip was simply the flower border of an old kitchen garden. Alyssum, yarrow, calendula, nasturtiums, standard plantings because the garden worked better when they were present. The beauty was a side effect of the function. And this is the part that surprised me most when I started researching these old layouts. What looks like a decorative cottage garden is actually a pest management system disguised as a flower bed. Every plant had a job. Nothing was ornamental for its own sake. The third principle is succession planting and crop rotation built into the layout from the start. When your family depends on the garden for food, you cannot have a 3-month gap between harvests. So these gardens were designed as wave systems. Cool season crops went in first: peas, lettuces, radishes, cabbages, as early as the soil could be worked. As each crop finished, the space was immediately replanted. Spring lettuces gave way to summer beans. Early radishes were replaced by late beets. Nothing sat empty, and the rotation was not random. Gardeners learned that growing the same crop in the same spot depleted the soil and invited disease, so they rotated on a 3 or 4 year cycle. Root crops followed leaf crops, legumes followed heavy feeders. This maintained fertility naturally because each crop group left the soil in a different condition than it found it. I started a simple 4-bed rotation 3 seasons ago, and soil quality has improved measurably each year. The beds that used to need heavy compost now produce strong crops with just a light top dressing. The rotation does the fertility work that bags of amendment used to do. The other benefit of rotation that most gardeners miss is disease prevention. Soil-borne pathogens that attack tomatoes build up in the soil when tomatoes grow in the same spot year after year. Move the tomatoes to a different bed, and those pathogens have no host. They decline naturally over 1 to 2 seasons. By the time tomatoes return to that bed on the rotation cycle, the disease pressure has reset. That is free disease prevention with zero effort. Just planning. The fourth principle is the one modern gardening lost almost completely: perennial infrastructure integrated into the annual garden. Modern vegetable gardens are entirely annual. Everything resets to zero each year. Pre-industrial kitchen gardens always included a permanent framework. Fruit trees at the borders, apple, pear, plum, producing hundreds of pounds annually for decades. Berry bushes along the fences, currants, raspberries, producing every summer with almost no maintenance. Perennial herbs near the kitchen door. Rosemary, thyme, sage, chives, available in early spring before any annual crop was planted. Asparagus and rhubarb in permanent beds producing for 20 years from a single planting. This perennial layer filled the gaps annuals could not. Berries in June before tomatoes ripened. Apples in October after the summer garden wound down. Herbs in March while soil was still too cold for seeds. Even a small yard can fit this perennial framework. 2 or 3 fruit trees along the property edge, a row of berry bushes along one fence, a patch of perennial herbs by the back door. You do not need acreage. You need a permanent layer that produces without replanting and extends your season in both directions. I added blueberry bushes, a raspberry row, and a permanent herb patch 2 years ago. The first year they produced, I realized they were covering exactly the months my annual garden could not. The system went from 7 months of production to approaching year-round, annuals as the engine, perennials as the frame. Together they create a food system, not just a seasonal planting. And unlike modern gardens that degrade over time, these old-world layouts were designed to improve. The polyculture builds soil diversity. The rotation maintains fertility. The perennials increase production each year. The beneficial habitat grows more established every season. The garden gets better the longer it runs. That is the real lesson from 200 years ago. A garden is not a project you restart every spring. It is a system you build once and improve forever. If you want to apply these principles in a single raised bed, watch the 4x8 layout video next. It uses the same layered structure to produce continuously from spring through fall.